Hello, and welcome to Career STEM Chats. In this episode, you'll be hearing a chat between our host, Sarah Cardozo Duncan, and Dr. Shuba Gopal. Dr. Gopal is a principal at Glean Signals LLC, where she uses data science and analytics to uncover workplace patterns that help people and organizations thrive. Shuba partners with leaders to turn complex insights into meaningful action and measurable results. Her work has been featured in Harvard Business Review, Strategic HR Review, the Wharton People Analytics Conference, and many other respected platforms. Before focusing on workplace analytics, Dr. Gopal spent more than a decade as a computational biologist, researching the genetic and metabolic drivers between complex diseases such as cancer and diabetes. She brings a unique combination of scientific rigor, analytical thinking, and human-centered insight into the future of work. We're excited to have her here today to talk about data, leadership, workplace culture, and what organizations can learn from the patterns hidden in everyday work. Here's our interview with Dr. Shuba Gopal.
Well, Shuba, thank you so much for joining us this evening. Well, it's so delightful to see you and so excited to talk to you about your career and the actual quite dramatic changes that you made kind of midway through, which is an unusual. So uh, perhaps we could start with, you know, when did you know? And bioinformatics, you were very early on as a data scientist. So if you could talk about that evolution of yours.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Sarah. I'm so glad to be here. And I'm excited for this conversation. I always knew I wanted to be in science, um, but I really actually in high school hated math and statistics. I was good at it, but I didn't enjoy it. It was very stress-inducing for me. And so if I were to go back to my 16 or 17-year-old self and be like, guess what, Shuba, you'll be using stats every day in your job. I'd be like, okay, split the red open right now. That's too horrible a future to imagine. So I've had, as you said, a bunch of dramatic changes. The first was when I started grad school, I thought I wanted to be in neuroscience, but I very quickly realized I didn't want to do experiments on animals. And I also, within the first year of being in grad school, realized I'm kind of terrible at experimental biology. It's just, I was too impatient. I wanted answers right away, experiments that take 3 weeks and every little step matters. These were not things that played to my strengths. But I was in a lab where at some point I realized the thing that brought me the most joy was fixing other people's computer problems. And I thought, oh, well, is this a thing? Can I just switch into a computer side of,
So who is asking you to fix? And what were you fixing?
oh, just every kind of thing. Like, oh, the internet went down. What happened? This is back in the 90s, so I'm dating myself. But anyway, the mid 90s, everything was wired in, and so often it would be the cable fell out or whatever, something simple like that. But sometimes it would be more complicated, like the DNA sequencing program is not loading this file because there are 3 lines at the beginning that are not the right format. Let's fix that. Or we loaded the data from the DNA sequencing file, and now we're looking at this pattern. We have no idea what it matches. Oh, well, let's copy this and compare it to things in GenBank, that sort of thing. And so at the time, there was a young assistant professor who had just started at my university, at Rockefeller University, doing what she called computational biology. And on a whim, I went to her office hours and I said, look, I'm really good at messing around with computers. Would you consider taking me on for a rotation? And she was brand new. She looked around her office and she goes, look, my office, my class, my students, it's all in this room. There's literally just me. I am happy to take you.
Oh, that's fabulous.
Yeah. And so that's how I started in bioinformatics or computational biology. It's just because I had realized that the lab environment was not the place where I was going to be able to do biology. Or I'd have to give up biology or I'd have to give up the lab. And I thought, okay, I'll try giving up the lab first. And then if that doesn't work, I'll give up the biology. But the switch to computational biology was just marvelous, because right away there were all these cool things to learn. My advisor worked in Unix, which I had never used before, but it was so it's all, command line type things, but I loved it because it was so much more control. It's like I used to say it's like going from driving an automatic car to a manual shift car. There's a bunch of things you have to learn, but then you have so much control over what you're doing. And the best part about working with computers, every experiment runs in under a minute, at least back then.
I mean, it satisfies your impatience of 3 weeks for waiting for results.
Exactly. There's no such thing. The longest search I think I ever ran took maybe 15 minutes, and it was an eternity. And I was like, I'm not doing anything that complicated again. We'll just do smaller things. So that's how I started in computational biology. Kind of fell into it because the other parts of biology didn't work so well for me.
Works so well for you.
Yeah.
And then you started, you were an assistant professor in bioinformatics for 5 years, or was that your postdoc?
I went directly to an assistant professor. So like you said, when I graduated with my PhD, it was still very early in the computational biology space. There weren't all that many, there were almost no postdocs because there were no professors really who were deeply in that space yet. And then I also really wanted to teach. And so this opening at an undergraduate school in upstate New York came up, and I thought, oh, well, I want to teach, and they need an assistant professor, why not? And it all worked out really well. Except that by the time I got to about the fourth or fifth year of being there, I realized I don't actually like teaching. I'd rather be doing research. And then life, in the meantime, I'd met my husband, and he was interested in, he had an opportunity to move to the Boston area. So I said, I don't really like teaching that much. I'll quit this job and find something in Boston, which is where I landed up at the Broad Institute, as a computational biologist. And that was, um, at the time, the Broad Institute was sort of one of the premier institutions for computational biology. They'd been involved with the Human Genome Project and everything that had come from it. And so it was really felt like, sort of a magical moment when I got the job offer from Broad, because it's like this is where you go to be a real computational biologist. I will say that the shine kind of wore off on my experiences there for various reasons, but the first few years were really magical. And I did do some really interesting work there.
And then you switched.
Yes. So the shine came off the apple, if you will. Um, in part because I kept running into this challenge. I'd be on these big teams, we'd be working on really hard science questions. And as the computational biologist, often what I would do is run these very complex analyses, make some predictions, and then I'd have to hand it off to an experimental biologist to try and test things in the lab. And that interface, sometimes it worked great. And there'd be this wonderful translation from what I had done computationally to an experimental setup, and we'd move on to show that it was valuable and meaningful, and everything worked great. And then other times, there wouldn't be that kind of handoff. They'd be like, yeah, we see your analysis, but we think it's this other thing, so we're just going to do that. And so there were a number of those sort of places where the team didn't quite gel. And
Almost sounds dismissive.
yeah, they were dismissive sometimes, but also sometimes they just didn't get it. No matter how many times I explained it, however many ways I explained it, they're like, it doesn't
They,
make sense.
they weren't data scientists.
Yeah, no, they weren't data scientists. They were experimental biologists. And sometimes they had a legitimate concern. They're like, you're saying we should do X, but we know from the other biology that Y and Z are more likely. So we'd rather invest our time in it. Okay, fine. But there were just these moments when the teams just didn't gel. Like there was not enough communication for me to understand that why they weren't going along with my recommendations or informing me of different ways to do the analysis to support what they wanted to do. And around that time, the Broad Institute had a new chief people officer, Andy Porter. And so I went to him and I said, listen, I have this observation of mine, which is that sometimes the science is hard, but the people work really well together and the science gets done. And other times the science is very hard, the people don't work together and it doesn't get done. So I think maybe it's the people, not the science, that's the problem here. If we could just get people to work well together, all of the science would get done. Can I do that with you? And bless his heart, he was kind enough to not laugh me out of the room, but instead to say, I need someone who can do more analytics for us in human resources. Why don't you do a trial project on my team? And so I did that for a couple of months, loved it. And
Why did you love it so much?
well, I think what it was is in addition to working on the people problem, which I decided was a much more interesting and complex problem than predicting the risk of cancer and diabetes, which are important problems. They weren't as interesting to me anymore. It was also that the things that I was working on were going to change programs and benefits and opportunities that HR was creating for people at Broad. So I could see the impact on real people I knew. Whereas
Ah,
when you're doing biomedical research for very good reasons, the data are all anonymized. You will never know the people whose data you are working with. And you don't often see the impact of it, right? Especially as a computational biologist. All right, I'll do some analysis. It'll be part of a paper. And maybe 10 years from now, it'll make some difference in a drug or a therapy or a treatment. But I won't see it anytime soon. Whereas this impact I could see right away, that we would do
which
an
is a thing,
analysis.
which seems to be a theme with you, Shuba.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's back to
Yeah.
that impatience. You got to see the thing right away.
So
Otherwise, it
come
doesn't work.
on.
Yes. Um,
I
so
love it.
yeah. So that I made the switch almost 10 years ago now and haven't looked back. And people are always like, well, don't you miss the science? And I'm like, I'm still doing science. It's still data. It's all the same methods. It's just that the results are about helping people be effective and performing at their best and contributing in meaningful ways at work, as opposed to whether or not they have a risk for diabetes or something like that.
Love it. Love it. And then, so, what, how long did you do the people analytics for?
Yeah, so like I say, it's been about 10 years since I made the switch. I did it at the Broad Institute and then another company for almost 6 years.
Wow.
And I liked going deep in each company, but what really I started to get curious about was how much of these patterns I'm seeing are common across organizations. I
Oh,
wanted to understand, are people everywhere, and what makes different organizations unique, or what makes some organizations so successful and others less successful. And so I came up with a whole bunch of different ideas for how I was going to do this. And the one that made the most sense was to become an independent consultant and basically work across companies, looking at the data and seeing the patterns across companies so I could better understand what does make some organizations more successful or what patterns track with success. So I launched my own company 4 years ago. And
excellent.
yeah, and I think one of the things I
And
like,
the name of your company?
it's glean signals. And glean is an old English word for hunting through the leftover
Gleaning.
bits of wheat to find the little bits of wheat that have been left over after you've harvested the wheat. And it's similar to what I do, which is to go through a lot of data, looking for those little signals that are really important but can be hidden. And so as an example, like one thing that I found at Broad and have since found at almost every organization where I've done it, is people need to hear how they're going to be able to grow professionally at their organization. They need to hear that much earlier than managers or HR are thinking about it. So managers, HR, they're like, oh, well, the person arrived, they got a year to get settled in their job, another year to really get mastery over it. And so maybe like at the 2.5, 3 year mark, we'll talk about career development. Whereas what my data and analysis have shown is actually you have to start talking about career growth at about the 12-month mark. Like before their first year is almost over, you have to be saying, here's how this could change. Here's how you could grow at this company if you want to keep them. And we were able to show in a couple of organizations now, if you target those conversations at that 12 to 18 months or so, you can keep people 2 to 4 times longer.
Longer.
Yeah. So instead of staying at an organization, say 3 years, they'll stay 6 years. They might say 9 years. But you can keep them a lot longer.
Which is, which maybe the audience may not be clear on, right? The substitution, the replacement of people cost a fortune.
Yeah.
Right. And the productivity of the, replacing everybody every 2 years so that they can go on and get a promotion someplace else.
Yeah.
Costs the organization because you're training for a year, they're productive for a year and maybe 9 months, and then they're looking for a job because nobody's spoken to them about here are the possibilities for you in this organization.
Yeah, exactly. And the other thing, there's research out there. I've shown it with a couple of company data as well. Every time you add someone to a team, the whole team actually loses some performance for 6 months to a year because you're getting used to having this other new person in there helping you figure things out. There's some really fantastic research from the National Cancer Institute actually that shows that research teams that are together for 4 or 5 years are much more successful with grant writing and write far more impactful scientific papers, like from a citation standpoint. So there's real evidence that like getting the team together and sticking together are really important for the outcomes that you care about.
Wow. Any other words of wisdom? Because this is just no, really, it's really food for thought. And that, maybe what the other thing is that people need to take hold of their careers and perhaps try and have if those conversations don't come at them, maybe at the 12-month, 14-month kind of time, there should be a conversation with the manager about career development.
Yeah, I agree. And I think, and we, myself and my co-author, we actually wrote a Harvard Business Review paper on that piece of it, more from the manager perspective of how do you set up those conversations. But there's advice in there, very much exactly as you say, like you can initiate these conversations. You don't have to wait for someone to ask you, what is your career aspiration? You can go to them and say, I've been here a year. I understand the role. Tell me what's next. I know I'm not ready for what's next, but I'd like to know what is next.
Or what do I have to do to build the skills to get to next?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And, it depends on your manager. Some managers are going to be better at answering that question than others. Some are going to be more invested in answering it well. But you can then take those same questions and go to your HR person and ask the same thing. And they're going to have at least some kind of information about this is what your responsibilities at this level are. This is what it looks like at the next level. And so you can build some knowledge, at least for yourself, about what career progression looks like. And sometimes the honest answer is this is a really flat organization and there isn't a next step, but you might have the opportunity to try a whole different kind of work if you move what's called laterally. So just to a similar position in a different group, a different lab, different project team. And those are just as effective in terms of feeling like you're developing your career, staying at the organization, feeling committed. Those are just as effective. So you don't have, the other thing I'd like to tell people is there's no need to think of it just as linear progression, like I'm a research scientist 1, and then I'll be a 2, and then I'll be a 3, and then I'll be a senior, and then you don't have to think of it that way. You could be a research scientist 1 and move to a different group and learn a whole different kind of science and do something really exciting and interesting, and you are growing your career. It isn't just the linear progression that matters. It's the learning and the doing that matter.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. Couldn't agree more. And I think, one of my questions is because we have a new generation in the workforce.
Yeah.
So do you have any thoughts on Gen Z? Have you done any
So
steaming?
I'll be honest, in the data, there isn't that much difference across generations. There's some difference in terms of like the sort of the importance of various things. Like career development's important for everybody, regardless of where they are in their career. Um, but things like a sense of belonging, being well recognized, those matter more to people early in their career. And so I guess you could track that with Gen Z. But I think actually, at least in the data and analyses I've done, I tend to think of it more as early, mid, later career as the buckets, because that's where the signal is, and less about the generational piece. Because if you are new in the company, but say a Gen X or a boomer, you may have the same need for belonging and recognition that a Gen Z worker would have in their first role. And so I tend to think of it more as how long have you been with the organization and where are you in your own career trajectory? And those two tend to be very predictive. I haven't seen the age generational piece as much. So
Just wait.
yes, and maybe that'll show up because
Just
there's
wait,
more.
because
Yeah.
they're coming into the workforce, they're
Yeah.
going into their PhD programs, and they're a delight to work with, just a delight.
Yeah,
And
you get to work with them much more than I
well,
do.
I'm going to be offering, actually, I'm going to do a beta testing. I have a program in mind for managers on communication with Gen Z,
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
it's not that difficult.
Right. Yeah, none of this is rocket science. That's what I like to always say. None of this is rocket science. It really just starts from
No,
being open-minded and asking questions and trying to understand where the other person is coming from. And if your manager isn't as receptive to those conversations, there's always other people who can help. And like I said,
yes.
the feeling being flexible about how you're growing your career really matters because very few places these days are like, I'm a one, then I'll be a two, and then a senior, and then a blah blah blah. That's not how it works in most
And
places.
it doesn't seem to work even in science, because if you look at, people are looking at forward in science, for example, cancer immunology, they're
Yeah,
like, yes, right? So why not go to an immunology lab if you've
yeah,
had, right? I mean, that's just makes sense to me.
yeah,
I,
absolutely. I think it's true in a lot of different areas that the cross-disciplinary area, the place where two disciplines intersect, that's
right.
usually a very powerful place. Like you can do a lot of good bringing your perspective to a different field, and that field can teach you new ways of thinking about things. Um, I like to joke that one of the things that was really exciting and interesting with the people work I did at Broad, we did a pay equity analysis. And so for people who don't know what that is, that's basically looking at everybody's salary at the organization and asking if you and I are doing the same job and we have the same kind of background, are we paid similarly? And there's a bunch of different ways to do it. And one of the challenges we had at the Broad at the time is we had lots of people with very unique job titles. And so it's really hard to know, do you and I do the same job if our job titles are really different?
Oh, interesting.
And so we spent some time trying to like organize job titles into categories so we could do a little bit more comparison. And we still didn't have large numbers of people in any of these categories. And so we ended up using a method from computational biology called permutation testing, which lets you manage the fact that you have small numbers of people in many categories. It lets you account for that and still see, is there a statistically significant difference? And that was an example of like taking something from my background in computational biology, applying it to a whole new field. And the work we did was really powerful. We were able to show that no, actually, there isn't any difference once we account for the reasonable things that should be different, like differences in background, differences in experience. And after we account for all of that, there wasn't any difference in pay. So we could say that we do have pay equity at Broad, but we were able to show it in a very rigorous and and significant way that most organizations wouldn't have done. And so that was a really satisfying example of that.
And really good to know.
Yeah. Yeah.
But full disclosure, I mean, the Broad is always been visionary.
Yeah.
And Andy Porter was the most visionary HR professional I've ever met in my life. Just booming. If there was something new and different, he wasn't somebody that would ever close the door to it. He was always excited about new and different. And maybe it'll work, and let's try a pilot project. And then you became his greatest asset.
Well, I think, like you say, he was open to things that I think most other HR professionals would have been more skeptical about, which worked in our favor that time.
Which was very nice.
Yeah.
And then so you left the Broad and you went to another company, and now you're in your own business as an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
Tell me how that is, and tell our audience, the good, the fabulous, and maybe the not so good.
Okay. Yes. Well, I do love it.
If you want to start with the not so good, you could start there.
Oh, okay. I can start with the not so good. The not so good part of working for yourself is that you have to manage the anxiety monster of where will the next job come from? Will I pay all my bills? What is needed to be financially viable and keeping me occupied? And the other not so good thing is it takes a while to learn what does and doesn't work in terms of projects and clients and organizations. So I would say the first 2 years, because I didn't know better, I just said yes to everything, which is one way to find out what you should have said no to, but usually too late to then say no. So then you're stuck doing projects and things that you're like, I don't want to do this. They don't want what I want, what I'm doing anyway. Why are we even doing this? But there were a bunch of those. I've gotten better at seeing those flags of, oh, you don't actually need what I'm offering, or you're not quite ready to receive what will come out of this analysis.
Oh, that's really interesting.
Yeah. So let's step back and do some basic work first, so that you're foundational work, so that you're ready to do these other more advanced things. So that was good learning. But I think the part I like most about working for myself is that now I pick the projects I work on, I pick the people I work with. And so generally, I'm very excited and happy every morning when I sit down at my desk to get started. Also, I work from home now, so that is a wonderful release. I used to have a ridiculous commute. And
Ridiculous?
Oh yeah, it was pretty awful. But now
you
those
just walk upstairs or walk downstairs.
exactly. Take off my pajamas and put on some clothes and sit down.
Yeah.
That's it.
It's the best. It's the best.
It's the best. So those are
It's the
I would
best.
say the plus points of it.
But you're doing well because you maintain your business for 4 years, right?
Yeah.
Most businesses fail within the first 2 years.
Yeah, I have to keep reminding myself of that, because this is the
Yeah.
other challenge if you're working for yourself. You just raise the bar all the time without even realizing it. It's not as if your manager tells you, next year, Shuba, we really want you to do A, B, and C better. Nobody says that to you. Instead, you say to yourself, next year, I'm going to do even better. And so you set the bar really high. And then you're like, why is it so high? I didn't need it to be there. I just need to be where it was last year.
I hear you.
Yeah. I'm sure you have the same challenge, right? It's
Well,
just
why do
really
you
hard.
think I'm doing this podcast? I never did a podcast before, Shuba, but I thought, oh, I think I should be doing podcasts because nobody told me to do it,
Yeah.
right? But I thought, well, there's a need, right? People really, there are lots of career panels, but it's not as, I don't think people hear
Yeah.
the way they would on a one-on-one conversation, because it's an audience and it's big, and this is, in somebody's ears, or maybe on a YouTube channel, listening and watching
Yeah.
talks about, or conversations, not even talks, conversations about STEM careers.
Right.
And I just loved that, your move to the side. It doesn't always have to, it can be a lateral move. It doesn't always have to be up because lateral is just as valuable.
Yeah, one of the people I deeply admire that I met at Broad, she had done that her whole career. She had moved in these lateral ways, and each lateral move had then led to a step up, and then it was another lateral move and another step up. And so I think we sometimes, especially early in our careers, we think it's all just steps up, and every side step is like a loss or something. No, sometimes the best way up is to go sideways. It's kind of
Oh,
like being a
absolutely.
crab, don't move directly at your target. Go around and see what else is there.
Up or under or around,
Exactly.
whatever you need to do.
Yeah.
Great. And any last minute?
I think I would say to people who are earlier in their career, especially, that there's no harm in experiments. And the point about an experiment is sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And so it's not a failing of yourself or your career or whatever. If you try an experiment and it doesn't work out, the best thing you can do is be like, okay, that didn't work out. What did I learn from it? I won't do that again. I think a lot of people, especially I certainly for myself early on, every step in my career felt so fraught. It had to be the right thing and I had to do it exactly perfectly. And otherwise, it would be a disaster and my career would be over. And no, it was a string of experiments and they mostly worked out. And when they didn't, I did learn from them. And I mean, I would tell my younger self if I could go back, like, make more experiments. Don't do fewer, do more.
Do more. Do more and more and more.
Yeah.
Maybe, yeah. I think that's just such sage advice. And because, when we talk about the generation that will be joining the workforce, I mean, they're full of anxiety,
Yeah.
right? Because this is a generation that doesn't feel that they'll ever be able to afford a home or have a family,
Yeah.
right? So, and it's the generation that was brought into conversations in families and became part of the family decision making very early on.
Yeah.
And also the COVID kids. They lost a
Yeah.
lot in COVID.
Right. Yeah, there's a whole different set of pressures now than there were.
Well, a lot of pressure on themselves. And I think because certainly that generation they were on computers from the age of 2,
Yeah.
like you, fast, fast, fast. 6 years for a PhD, Sarah? Yeah. And they say, really? And I say, well, how long do you think you're going to work for? And they say, well, maybe 40 years. I said, yeah, so 6 years. And when you put it in context, it's great. But
Yeah.
out of context, it's anxiety.
Yeah.
Anyways, but I think they're fabulous. I really do. And I'm looking forward to them joining those academic labs and asking
Yeah.
questions.
Yes, for sure. It's going to change things up
It's going to
dramatically.
change things up for the better. I really do believe that. And when you're talking, maybe we could end with this is what are your goals for next year then?
That's a great question.
Because if you
Um,
don't have somebody asking you, maybe I'm the person that should check in every December and say, hey, have you set your goals yet?
yes. So I don't have formal goals at the moment. Part of what I do is take the last couple of weeks of December over the holidays to sort of get all my thinking gelled and ready for the new year. So I haven't quite gotten there yet. Two things I know I want to do. One is so far I've been incredibly lucky in my business that almost all of my work comes through my existing network and referrals. And that's, as someone pointed out to me a few days ago, that's a huge vote of confidence, right? Like for someone to
Mm,
say, I've worked with Shuba and she's really great and you should work with her too. That's a tremendous benefit. But what I'd like to do in the next year is start thinking about how do I share what I do with people who haven't worked with me or don't know someone who's worked with me. So beyond that referral network, how do I showcase what I do to people beyond those who know me well? And so that's going to be a goal of mine, is to just get to figure out that kind of marketing, I guess.
What the next step is in terms of marketing. And you know, Shuba, you have a phenomenal reputation. I mean, you've been up on stages, you've written fabulous papers, and your reputation is precise, right? You want it right, and you want it correct, and you want it crystal clear.
Yeah,
Not just clear, it has to be crystal clear for you.
exactly. Yeah.
So I don't think it's going to be a hard lift up. I really don't.
Yeah, so that's one of my goals. And then the other goal is to lower the bar back to where it needs to be, which is, if I did as well as I did this year, that would be plenty. Yeah.
Did you have a good time this year?
I would have had a better time if I hadn't had this idea in my head for the first 7 or 8 months of the year that I should be doing better than the previous year.
Well, you know, one of the things that you know, I'm in a similar situation, although my business has been around for over 30 years. And so everything that you talk about, paying the bills and so on, and turning on the lights and taking out the garbage,
Yeah.
right? Because that's what you have to do in your own business. But the satisfaction of it and the way I've been able to pivot
Yeah.
has been just so exciting for me. I mean, it's been a great, I just love what I do, and I feel that I'm science adjacent, and that's how I see myself. I'm really good at certain things. I'm not a scientist, I'm not a data scientist, nothing like that. But I do understand behavior in people.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
You're one of the
And
best with that.
and I love it. And so no complaints. As I said, now I've reached my goal for 2025 was to have a podcast. Here we
Yeah.
go. Now what am I doing in 2026? I'm going to do a communication workshop for managers
Okay.
for the Gen Zs. So hold
Yeah.
me to that, Shuba.
That sounds like good goals to me.
So far,
Yeah.
we'll see what else comes down the road, as well as I need to make an introduction. We can do this offline. And because somebody who's doing exactly the work in teams that you're talking about
Okay.
is the person you need to meet.
Okay. Sounds
Because
good.
I think and she may be launching a company as well. So
Okay.
I think there might be some synergy between the two of you.
Okay. Awesome.
Yeah,
All
it
right.
should
Well,
be
thank you,
exciting.
Sarah.
You're welcome. And thank you, Shuba. This has been just the best conversation.
Yeah.
And will be really encouraging to those who are starting out and also to those in mid-career level or even maybe higher because you changed at the mid
Yeah.
and then you went from an institution to your home office, to your
Yeah.
own business. Fascinating journey. Thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate everything.
Thank you so much, Sarah. This has been great fun.
You're welcome.